Imagine living by the beach. Being able to walk on the golden sand. Seeing birds above. And dogs below. The soothing sound of the waves breaking on the shore. And the salty H2O healing your wounds. A sight so beautiful to visualize. A sight that is aesthetically pleasing. A sight that is eroding away for residents in Portrane, County Dublin.
Next stop, Portrane, Port Rockern.
It is estimated that by 2050, the impact of coastal erosion around the Irish coast could affect up to 2 million people. Its full force can be felt in Portrane, a small seaside village in North County Dublin. Approximately 1,200 people live here, and many of their homes are right on the coast, a coast that has been rapidly disintegrating since the turn of the century. Padda Bates is a historian who has been living in the Portrane area all his life. Records of his ancestors living in this area go back to 1654. It was this that motivated him to write his book, Donabate and Portrane, A History. When did the first people settle in Portrane?
According to the archaeological excavations, the earliest they can come across is 6000 BC. And they found various evidence of flintstone workmanship.
Since then, St. Ida's campus has been developed in Portrane. It was built as a hospital in 1896, and it was a source of much amazement among the local residents when their area was picked as a location for the development.
A quiet area, country area, suddenly came to life with all the traffic coming in, machinery, workers, carts going up and down with materials. But it gave plenty of employment. And I don't think employment was ever a short commodity in the parish since then.
St. Ida's campus includes the Water Tower and Round Tower. The Water Tower was built in the 1960s to supply water to the hospital, while the Round Tower was erected by Sophia Evans in 1844 in memory of her husband George, a Member of Parliament for County Dublin.
There's an old photograph dated 1906, and it shows you the soccer team at that time. But it's not the earliest football club in the parish.
Prior to the setting up of the Portrane Asylum football team, another team existed. The Shillelaghs, established in 1889, were the first recorded GAA team in Portrane. Though no longer in existence, the parish has seen the formation of other clubs, including St. Patrick's GAA, St. Ida's AFC, Portrane Athletic, and Portrane Hockey Club. Lambay Island can be seen from Portrane and is where the RMS Taylor ran aground in 1854 on its maiden voyage to Australia. To commemorate the sinking of the Taylor, an anchor was placed on the green in front of the beach. However, due to the erosion, it had to be moved. Hi, Nancy. Nancy Dempsey was born and raised in Portrane. From a young age, she has witnessed the gradual disappearance of the beach.
The beach at that time was way out where the sea is now. What I remember, the early days were hills and valleys, and the only kind of structures that were there for years were holiday homes, such as railway carriages. Now, they're gone, of course.
A boardwalk was built on the beach in 2007, but brunt waves less than a year later caused it to collapse in some areas. Today, it hangs in the balance.
The boardwalk was put there to protect the dunes. It was put in from the edge in order to make sure that people didn't walk on the edge or put too much pressure on the area. I think we all thought it was going to last, hoping it would last.
Though this erosion has been causing issues in the past decade, Portrane residents have been voicing their concern as early as the 1940s. A local states in a letter sent to the county commissioner in 1943 that the garden in front of my place is gradually being eaten away by the sea and weather.
The weather has changed considerably. We had violent storms about 14 years ago, I'd say, 13, 14 years ago. Months after 2007, I think, it got really bad. And of course, it kept getting worse.
Nancy, thank you very much for your time and take care. The erosion has been a cause of concern for many residents in the past. Now, in 2021, more families are at risk as the sea continues to chip away at the Portrane coastline. I know there are a lot more kind of CVs they won't place there, kind of that. Eddie Monks owns the local chipper in Portrane. Living here for over 40 years, his home lies metres away from the dunes. During the last 10 years, he has become concerned about the increasing erosion.
We started filling sandbags then first. We started doing that every Saturday, maybe every second Saturday. And then they got covered and then we had to do it again. And then there was meetings going on with the council at the same time, so they eventually came up with this, the CBs.
In 2018, Fingal County Council installed concrete barriers, known as CBs, along the Portrane coast. They were put in place as an interim emergency measure.
They work for a while, but then, as you see, they get buried. It slows it down, but it's not the answer.
To combat the erosion that is edging towards his garden, Eddie drove a number of 5-metre pylons into the ground.
It just kind of takes that panic away from it, you know what I mean? Like you go up and you can look out the tide now and you're not as worried.
The public toilets once stood next to Eddie's home and business. Built 15 years ago, the continuing erosion led to them being demolished and replaced by temporary toilets. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
As the way it's going, I can see the sea up against my wall for a start, you know. I can see the council removing them CBs and just letting the sea do what it likes here at this end.
Eddie's family are at risk of losing their home like hundreds of others around Ireland. Across 130 locations, 824 properties are potentially at risk of being washed away. These properties include private homes and businesses. Portrane is a small community which offers services to locals and visitors alike. The non-stop erosion has raised the bar for the provider of these services and has adversely affected the livelihood of many in this close-knit community. The Brook Pub was built in 1896 by William Keeling, looking to make business from the workers that were building St. Edith's Hospital at the time. Now owned by Mick Moynihan, he and his daughter Hannah have been raising the issue of coastal erosion with the political authorities.
For a long time now, I think with 20-odd years or more, we've been literally onto the politicians. Many high-profile ministers, especially ministers for environment, have been down here over the years, telling us all what they were going to do, and every one of them consistently doing nothing.
In the 1950s, a steel revetment was built on Portrane Beach, covering a stretch of the coastline behind the brook.
That has been our saving grace at the moment, without any shadow of a doubt. If that hadn't been there, I would say we would have been gone years ago.
Mick's father and Hannah's grandfather, Patrick Moynihan, bought the Brook Pub in 1959. 3 years later, he sent a letter to the Minister for Local Government, outlining the effect that the coastal erosion in Portrane would have on his business. Since Patrick wrote his letter, climate change has become a much discussed topic, but has this made any difference to the owners of the Brook Pub?
Political action, I'd say, has just been very, very little. Like, this isn't a problem. Like, coastal erosion in Portrane, like, it's been there for about 70 years. It's not something that's just happened the past 2 or 3 years.
As the younger generation are more conscious of the environment, will their awareness of green issues make them more willing to tackle coastal erosion when they become the influencers of the future?
Young people are good now in relation to climate action. Young people are buying secondhand more. But in relation to the coastal erosion, young people, or just people in general, I think if the problem doesn't directly affect you, why should I care, is the attitude, I think.
Who else in Portrane has been affected by the erosion?
The Shevlins are the ones that down here. The garden has been, I think, more or less gone. They've put measures to try and stop the erosion, but again, it's just been washed away all the time.
David Shevlin has been living in Portrane for over 20 years. Since then, he and his family have lost upwards of 20 metres of their garden and have growing concerns about the erosion.
Really became a concern around 2011 after a few storm events undermined the public right, or public walkway. And after that, pretty much the sea has been taking.
What effect has the erosion had on the service utilities, such as underground pipes, electricity?
Yeah, the last storm event back in August, we lost our main sewage connection. So we had to have a rerouting of that.
Wanting to prevent the dune being further eroded by the incoming tide, David constructed a barrier consisting of sandbags last year.
Just felt that if I didn't do something, I was just going to continually lose, to the point where the house would actually be tipping on the edge. So I had to act. It's within my boundary. I surely have the rights to protect my home.
After David built his barrier, Fingal County Council released a statement asking residents living along the Portrane coastline to avoid erecting barriers.
I put a few questions to them, and when I didn't get appropriate answers, I informed them that I will be re-erecting my boundary fence, which I have every right to. It's my property.
The coastal erosion in Portrane has seen one resident lose her home. Grania Hannigan had to vacate her property in 2018, and a year later, the house collapsed onto the beach. How confident are you that this problem will be fixed?
I'm more hopeful than confident. I suppose the plans are in place for a protection measure, but with COVID and with planning issues in this country, who knows when those will be put in place.
The measures that are being planned for Portrane Beach include the installation of sea groins. These require ongoing maintenance and they may have an impact on the supply of sand to other beaches, but the advantages are that the popular beach amenity is restored and the groins also provide a good level of protection against flooding and erosion.
We have lost a significant amount ourselves within 2 years, and at that rate, you know, if it's not protected, it'll be washed away.
Darren Clarke is a lecturer in the School of History and Geography at DCU. First-year students are taught about coastal erosion, and Portrane is used as a case study.
So primarily, waves are around Portrane here are the primary factor that cause the erosion. We're in a very exposed area of coastline. It's a sandy coastline with not a lot of rock to protect against coastal erosion. We've had high tides, we've had strong winds and heavy rainfall combined, and that can lead to extensive erosion here.
What causes the waves to go so far out and then extremely close that they're hitting the dunes?
So that's a process of physics. We have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day in all coastal locations worldwide. And tides go out, that's at low tide, tides come in, that's high tide. And it's that process of waves coming in along with potentially stormy weather that can bring them in a little bit further and then retreat back out. And that is caused by the gravitational pull of the moon on Earth's surface.
How effective are CBs as a means of stopping erosion?
The CBs tend to break the waves and break the impact, the strength of the waves coming in. They're not a permanent solution whatsoever. They are a temporary solution. Without them, there's no question that erosion rates would be, some of the houses that we see behind us here, there's likely those houses would be at greater risk of falling into the sea effectively.
Donabate Beach is approximately 1 kilometre away from here and has hardly been affected by coastal erosion. So why is it a problem on Portrane Beach?
On Portrane Beach in particular, what we have is just a sand dune. We don't have any geology, we don't have any rocks or anything. The geology, even a kilometre, a couple of kilometres down the road, is different. It's also potentially more sheltered from erosion just because of its location of where it is. Ireland's landscape, Ireland's geology is so dynamic from here to maybe 300, 400 metres further away.
The issue of coastal erosion is complex, as economic, social and environmental factors must be considered when preventive measures are being put in place.
Potentially what it might mean is, from a sand dune perspective, the best answer is to retreat, but that's not practical for a lot of people here. That's their livelihoods here, so it's not necessarily the only solution. But that's something that will be played out in my lifetime, in your lifetime. We'll likely see what the consequences of that are in the next 10, 20 years.
The issue of coastal erosion is a matter for Fingal County Council, who are working with state bodies such as the Office of Public Works and the National Parks and Wildlife Service to address this situation along the beach. As early as 1949, the coastal erosion in Portrane was a topic of discussion in Irish political circles. It has remained a very live issue up to the present day. In his 78 years spent living in Portrane, Sean Ryan is no stranger to coastal erosion, having seen the back garden of his old home being washed away by the sea when he was a child. A TD and senator for 18 years, he introduced a coast management bill into Dáil Éireann, which highlighted the damaging effects of erosion in the borough area of Portrane and called for protection measures to be put in place.
I felt, and I was illustrated by the delay in bringing forward the management bill at that stage, that within the officials in the department, that priority wasn't being given. But thankfully, today that has changed, that is changing.
How effective has the rock armour been that's been placed on the beach?
I'm a supporter of rock armour, right? Wherever it can be provided. It's a cheaper and effective protection. But one of the problems here at the borough is that with the Rogerstown estuary, it's a special area of conservation.
Under the EU Habitats Directive and EU Birds Directive, Rogerstown Estuary, which includes Portrane Beach, is designated as a special area of conservation and a special protection area. As a result, the options for preventive coastal erosion measures in Portrane are limited. What advice would you give to the local residents here who are anxious to get Fingal County Council to address this problem?
Put pressure on the local councillors, the local TDs and everyone to make sure that there's not a further delay with this proposal.
Adrian Henchy is a Fingal County councillor. Born and raised in Portrane, he and Fingal County Council are hoping the construction of sea groins on Portrane Beach will begin as soon as possible. But due to the EU Habitats Directive, the proposal has to go through the imperative reasons of overriding public interest process.
There's only been one other successful application, that was down in County Sligo. I don't underestimate the fact that it's going to be a serious challenge to get it over the line with An Bord Pleanála, but hopefully we will, by just June, carrying out the due diligence, carefully analysing the consultations that come in and working closely then with RPS, who have been the consultants that have been working on it over the last number of years here in Portrane.
Worst case scenario, if it isn't approved, what is the backup plan?
If it's not to be, obviously we will be back to the drawing board, but I think it'll have to fall back in some degree of a national strategy to deal with it, because it is happening, and it's happening at a very quick rate. It can't be ignored and needs to be addressed.
There are CBs that have not been deployed onto Portrane Beach, so what would become of them?
Certainly, if it was up to me, I'd certainly love to reinforce this area here behind the local businesses in Portrane. But I think RPS are the best in terms of making that decision ultimately.
What supports have been made to Grania Hannigan to compensate her for the loss of her home, and to other residents such as David Shevlin and Eddie Monks who are at risk?
In terms of Grania's situation, I do know there was significant engagement there with Fingal County Council. The council probably would say that for now the CB units is buying us time, and that's fine. And I think the residents are willing to give that a chance. Everybody is doing their best, and as I say, it is complex, it is challenging. But I'm hoping over the next certainly the next number of months we'll see movement on the application, and then hopefully An Bord Pleanála won't wait too long in the delivery of what will hopefully be a positive decision.
Now departing Portrane, Port Rockland.
Coastal erosion cannot be stopped, but methods are available to limit its impact. The residents of Portrane await approval for the installation of sea groins. Whether or not this will be successful remains to be seen.